What a joy it is now to be joined by Bob Swan, Intel Chief Executive Officer. Of course, been in the role for a couple of years now, almost at the business for more than 4 years almost. And Bob, it is so important at this moment to be talking about sustainability, something that you know so well, being based on the West Coast, not only confronting a health crisis, an economic crisis, a social crisis, but also a climate crisis is so evident with the fires. And when you think about the world changing digital presence you want to have, the world changing movement you have in terms of technology, how do you ensure you're doing that without being at the detriment of sustainability or at the detriment of the climate when it takes a lot of energy to make chips?
Yeah, well, Carolyn, first, it's a pleasure to be with you. And it does take a lot of energy to make chips. But the idea for us of social responsibility and sustainability is one of the key focus areas for us is not a new idea. So we've been working on sustainability for a very long time. We've made tremendous progress over the years, increasing green energy use to 71% globally, 100% here in the US, decreasing water usage despite the fact that our company is so much larger today than it was simply 5 years ago. So it's been part of our responsibility as a corporation for a very long time. But in so many ways, we also realize the opportunity set we have going forward. So like all of our corporate social responsibility initiatives, we set these big, broad goals for what we think we can accomplish. And then we get after it as a company because, to your point, it is so important for the global economy, for us here in the U.S. and for Intel, who has a very global footprint.
Well, just in layman's terms, talk to us about the Herculean task it is to try and cool data centers and then the energy that's needed to ensure that they are kept cool. But as we move into this new digital age and every company is investing in data centers and in more powerful chips, how hard is it to ensure that you're not having to ramp up energy use and not having to have a climatic impact?
Well, I mean, it's first, it's extremely complicated, but at the same time, it's probably more important than it is the complexity in which we have to deal with. So our company always embraces complexity in our quest to have a real impact on the society in which we operate in. So think about a fab. I mean, we have large fabs around the world, here in the US, in Israel, in Ireland, and these fabs generate millions and millions of chips, almost, each week. And in developing chips, you need to have a very clean environment. Clean requires real energy efficiency. And to have energy efficiency for us, we believe to be increasingly sustainable, to make sure that water usage, that we can reuse water. We create an infrastructure that allows us to reuse water so that we're not using too much in the environments in which we operate. So it's always been very important for us. If you think about the world today and some of the challenges that we're going through, the demand for compute is just it's higher than it's ever been. The amount of data that we all want to consume and analyze and store and move data around, whether it's in the palm of our hand or in the cars that we drive, the demand for compute is higher than it's ever been. And therefore, how we make this a core part of what we do, sustainability a core part of what we do, as opposed to a sideshow, is really important. So it doesn't become yet another thing we have to think about. It becomes ingrained in the core of what it is that we do each and every day.
Bob, I like the way you put it, a side project or a side shoot. Like, talk to us about how hard it has been, I'm sure, as a leader at this moment when you are confronting so many crises, but to ensure that you are putting climate change at the front of the agenda and it doesn't somehow get pushed behind some of the more immediate issues of how on earth you get your people to work, how you ensure that they're efficient while working from home and in the fabs and in the labs that you talk of, and of course the crises of the economy and trying to make people's mental health sustainable. How are you ensuring that you keep the world in your mind's eye?
Yeah. I think first, for us, it's helped tremendously that it really starts with our purpose as a company. So we create world-changing technologies that enrich the lives of every person on Earth. That's the core of what we do. And what we've realized over time that purpose, strategy, values, and social responsibility, in order to have a real impact, have to be inextricably linked. So it's very important for us that purpose isn't something that goes on the wall and social responsibility isn't something that goes in a report, but they're one and the same. So it's been part of our fabric for a very long time. And to the extent when crises come, we look to our purpose as a guide, as a North Star, if you will, about how do we make sure that we're stepping up in moments of crisis as opposed to stepping back. And whether it's sustainability, whether it's how technology is deployed for good, or whether it's about diversity and inclusion, which are our three big pillars, these things fit within the core purpose of the company, the strategy, and the values, so that when things become tougher, it's not one more thing to do, but it's the things that we do in each and every day.
Talking about stepping up, you've just been penning a letter, an open letter to President-elect Joe Biden, asking for some, focus points, I think, from the new administration when it's about investing in infrastructure here in the United States, investing in manufacturing, investing in people, in pipelines, so that the US can reassert itself as, chip making king. You think of chip making prowess as Intel from 1968, the birth of manufacturing here for chips and leading the way. Do you think with the new administration it will help you with that progress, in particular be more sustainable in and of the other focuses that you have?
Well, I think over the last 52 years of our existence, we've been engaging with governments around the world for things that we believe matter most, not just in terms of what makes sense for our industry and our company, but also what makes sense for social good. So each and every administration, we embrace them, try to find common grounds for things that matter the most. It just so happens now, things that matter quite a bit are sustainability, are the access to technology across the spectrum. When you're working or studying from home, if you're in rural areas, the ability to have access to technology today is more important than it's ever been. So we try to work with administrations, governments around the world, customers, partners, on things of common interest. And we believe that the deployment of technology, continuing to evolve the workforce to deal with the embracement of technology and/or digital divides that get created by technology, we reach out and try to engage along the way so that we can be working closely with administrations to have as big a positive impact as we possibly can.
For positive impact, of course, you need to become more efficient. And I mean, Moore's law, of course, was coined, the very term was coined by the co-founder of Intel. And the Moore's law is the idea that, of course, as time goes on, we become ever more efficient when it comes to compute and technology. But are you hitting sort of a roadblock now? Are we seeing that we're not getting the sort of constant efficiencies that we always used to write in and think about? Is particularly, are you worried about Intel specifically hitting a wall in terms of reducing returns when it comes to efficiency?
Well, I would start with Moore's law is alive and well. At the
Hmm.
same time, the demands for compute are as expansive as they've ever been. So just moving forward with Moore's law, which we have every intention doing, is no longer sufficient. So we like to think about delivering leadership products requires advancements in Moore's law. It requires more packaging technologies so you can mix and match chips. It requires software to extract more and more performance out of the hardware that you develop. So I think Moore's law is alive and well, and we continue to invest significantly in it. But at the same time, the demands for computer are as expansive as they've ever been, and it requires more than simply transistor density to deliver superior performance for our customers around the world.
What does it need then, if more than that?
But we like to think about it as really 6 different pillars of technology. Advancement of transistor density or Moore's law, coupled with packaging technologies, how you mix and match different hardware onto the same chip. So packaging and transistor density.
Mm,
Second, it has to deal with different architectures. It's not simply just the CPU today, but it's what we call the XPU. How do you develop GPUs, accelerating technologies to deal with increasingly changes in workloads over time?
mm.
Third, it requires security, building security into everything you do. It requires software and it requires the movement of data faster and faster because you want ready access to that data. So from what used to be CPU and Moore's law, today we think about Moore's XPU, variety of
Mm.
architectures, and 6 pillars of technology required to deal with today's emerging demands and workloads in both corporate and personal environments.
Yeah, how has that changed with COVID and the stresses that the work from home has put upon the system? In many ways, COVID is, of course, this dark, dark cloud that we will have to weather, but there have been some silver linings for the climate, for one. We're all flying less, and perhaps there has been some benefits to climate change and stalling out. But has it had unintended consequences for you as you see the need for more technology and the provision of that with everyone working from home?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think in so many ways, for the last several years, every industry, every company, every individual, in some way, shape, or form, have been dealing with their own pace of digital transformation. I think with COVID, it's almost put the digital transformation, no matter what industry or company you're in, has put it on steroids. And the need to access, always on, connectivity, being able to connect like this rather than in person, puts demands on compute. And so, in so many ways, for us, 2020 is going to be the biggest year in our company's history. And part of that is a function of the increased demand for compute, whether it's work from home, whether it's study from home, or whether it's always connected. The demands for compute are as large as they've ever been. And the nature of the products is changing as well. I mean, work from home requires more mobility. The nature of our products, less desktop, more mobility has been a significant change, really since March and April of earlier this year. So digital transformation is being accelerated. The need to have always on access is important, and the demand for our products and our services is as large as it's ever been this year.
2020 is this pivotal year, as you said. It's been a really challenging year for Intel in particular as well. And I'm interested in how you've weathered that and how you look at the concerns you might have that competition is really tough, that in particular the efficiencies that Intel's always been able to demonstrate, been able to leapfrog others with, particularly Intel's x86, for example. We're starting to see competitors of yours, I won't name names, talking about that their offerings are inherently more efficient. How do you respond to that? Do you believe it?
Well, I think first and foremost, the demand for compute, as I said earlier, and this insatiable appetite for data and the needs to compute and analyze and store and move that data are as great as they've ever been. And therefore, for us, we've seen the realization to how do we, as I said before, evolve the products that we offer for our customers so that we can play a bigger role in their lives as the demand on them increases. So we've expanded our product offering. The market we serve today is as large as it's ever been. This will be our fifth record year of performance in our storied 52-year history. And the reality that we're not the only ones that see this massive opportunity in front of us is okay. And competition, in fact, will make us stronger. And we think, despite a glorious past, the best days are in front of us.
Mm. Competition can make you stronger. Do you think regulation, well-formed regulation, when it comes to preserving the climate, for example, can still fuel you to be more competitive, to be, for example, as a US industry group, more competitive vis-a-vis China, for example, that yes is also taking climate seriously, but perhaps isn't enacting some of the regulation that we might see in the future as the US currently faces?
Well, I think in so many ways, on the regulatory front, nudges on big things that really matter are helpful. But in
Mm.
conjunction with those nudges, it's how are companies with governments, how are we working together with a nudge to really drive positive change going forward. And if you think about sustainability today, for us, our customers demand it. Our employees, our access to employees, it's really important to them, and increasingly it's important to shareholders. So there's not really a debate about the importance to get after it. It's how do we work together to have the biggest positive impact that we possibly can.
Talking about nudges, I give our audience a gentle nudge that they too can ask questions. Of course, I've got the great joy of asking Bob Swan questions, but if you've got any, do send them in as we discuss for another 5 minutes, really about the future of sustainability and how that interweaves with Intel's vision and, in particular, world-changing technologies vision that you have. And Bob, you were sort of talking about how inherently we talk about US versus China and the growth trajectory in which you have. Do you inherently feel optimistic right now that you can measure as you want the impact that you're having and respond to, as you say, the stakeholders that want to see it, whether it's your employees, your shareholders, and indeed government regulation that wants you to hit certain measures and marks?
Yes, the short answer is yes, we do. And in part of our setting of our goals, if you will, we have a practice of each year we do an annual report on those measures that we set. What progress have we in fact made? And we try to, when we set these big goals, if you will, for corporate social responsibility, we set them with the intention that we're going to raise the bar on ourselves, hopefully raise the bar on others, but also report in a transparent manner the progress that we've made on an annual basis and the goals and objectives we have going forward. So, earlier this year, we issued our annual report. We talked about the progress around green energy at 71% globally, 100% here in the US. We talked about a company that's 40% larger, using 38% less water. So we talk about our accomplishments on an annual basis in a numerical way, but we also talk about the goals that we're going to set. And again, given that it's the change of a decade, this year we laid out some real ambitious goals over the next 10 years that are quantifiable in nature on how we'll deploy technology for good, how we'll move forward on diversity and inclusion, and how we'll continue to push the needle on sustainability over the course of the next 10 years. And we set these goals, and annually, part of our practice is to update our constituents on how well we're doing on the goals that we set for ourselves.
Do you think the investor base, I feel like again and again, we've heard from the Business Roundtable, for example, saying, hey, for ages we haven't just been about profit, we've been about many other things. But if you're not delivering on profit, how much leeway do you think investors really do give you? Or is it just a nice to have that you're fulfilling these other roles that you say are really part of your pillars over at Intel at the moment?
Well, I think it's increasingly important for everyone. But I also, as I said earlier, I don't think these things are mutually exclusive anymore. I mean, it's fairly well chronicled. Diversity and inclusion, for example, that the more diverse and inclusive your workforce, the better it is for business. Secondly, for us on sustainability, this is really important for our customers. So the more we can build into the efficiency of our products, a carbon neutral environment, the better it is for our customers. As I mentioned earlier, regardless of sustainability, diversity, inclusion, or more broadly, social responsibility, if you want to attract the best people to join your team, it's increasingly important to them. So I think today it's important for more and more constituents, and it's not a zero-sum game. We know that if we make progress on these three big initiatives that we're tackling from a social responsibility standpoint, our customers are going to care more, our employees really care, the communities in which we operate really care, and investors really care. So it's not, as I said before, these are not separate initiatives or separate constituents. I think the reality is we're all fairly closely aligned on the things that matter most, and we work together to try to move forward and have as broad an impact as a collective group as opposed to individual companies.
I love it. We end on a note where it sounds like it's a win-win-win. We very much hope that it is, that you can work going forward to make sure that good business is indeed a sustainable business. I really want to thank you for so much for your time today, Bob Swan, amid so many challenges and focuses that your business has. And of course, as we all face the ongoing health crisis, we wish you to stay very well indeed, and that of your employee base. We thank you for your time, Bob Swan of Intel.